Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome to this month in German, Swiss, and Austrian startup news. It's our Summer 22 wrap-up which fills us with a bit of nostalgia because apparently summer is already over, even though it's still hot. Today I have the honor to start the show. My name is Christian. I'm sitting in New York, and I am joined by my co-founder and co-host Joe. Before we start, we have to congratulate you for having had your second baby.
Well, actually, my wife had. I was just holding hands.
Having said all this, let's get started because we are having a new format here right now to wrap up July and August. We used to mash up all of July, August, September into one episode in September. That tended to get very, very long. Or we had to leave a lot out. So this time we're trying something new. We came up with the idea of a standalone summer wrap up. Especially since the US are still the biggest market for us, we decided to publish the episode on Labor Day, the US's unofficial end of summer and a federal holiday. If you want to, let us know if you like the idea. Nonetheless, the recording will be a bit longer than usual because so much stuff has happened. And so grab one of those last fancy summer drinks with little umbrellas. And let's get started. We recorded the episode on Wednesday, August the 24th, 2022. Germany is experiencing an inflation spike, which is true for a lot of countries these days, dyeing up funding in private markets for some mostly non-profitable startups, as well as preparing for a potentially very cold winter. So Germany has a huge discussion going on about rising energy and especially gas prices related a lot to the Ukraine war and Germany being very energy dependent on Russia. And in preparation for that, from what I hear or read from here, is that Germany is even considering to ban having store windows lit at night or public buildings at night, just as a sign of saving energy. As always, all news not yet included here will be published in our next news episodes in our regular September wrap-up, and you can keep up to date with our Google Calendar for all publications. This as a tiny bit of housekeeping, and now let's get to business and let's give us a little overview about the episodes and tell us about the upcoming highlights, Joe.
Yes, of course. Our highlights. Startups in GSA did better than expected. We had a few insolvency filings, but also major fundraisings like Celonis, who raised $1 billion published just a few days ago, a combination of equity and debt funding. Insurtech, WeFox also raised $400 million. One can already see the signs of a downturn. M&A activity is going up, as well as the news about insolvency or job cuts and hiring freezes. But according to a Bitkom survey, which is a German association for telecommunications and electronics, survey found 8 out of 10 startups in Germany are still hiring. Deal Time, our recent guest Konto buys former guest Penta, and there was more in a B2B neobank deal week. We blogged about it. And even Allianz, the German insurance juggernaut, had to learn one cannot buy fintech success, and there is more news on Wirecard. We will also bombard you with funding data in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, as well as global numbers. Please keep in mind you can read everything with a little bit patience. Find all the numbers on our Medium blog, medium/startuprate-io or startuprate/io, and there you can find everything. We have the link here down in our show notes. Don't miss out on our radio station, and on Linktree you can find all options to subscribe. Again, this podcast was made possible by the generous support of Invest in Hessen, with which We run a dedicated sub-podcast for startups in Hessen and startupraven.com, the best way to identify investors and cooperation partners for early stage startups. So you can sign up there for early access. Chris, I did a little bit highlights. Can you bring us some top news?
Yeah. So probably one of the biggest success stories in the German startup scene or funding scene in general is Celonis. And Celonis secured another $1 billion in funding. With a 400 million Series D extension and a 600 million credit facility at a valuation of now around 13 billion dollars, cementing their spot at Germany's most valuable startup, as well as Germany's only decacorn so far. But I do have to admit that I still have a bit of a hard time to explain what they actually do. So they are basically looking at your business processes and do process mining in order to help identify unrealized efficiencies. What they do, example, now, as the press release stated about the new funding, is that they are helping with supply chain issues to make your business run more smoothly.
And Chris, do you know what's also impressive about them? They raised in total 2.4 billion dollars in funding. So they not even doubled their funding with this $1 billion, but still a lot of money.
And it also goes a bit again to since we always try to provide a bit of a context about Germany and the German startup scene. It goes back, I think, to this idea of the fact that Germany very often is not probably like the sexiest startup market and coming up with like, oh, the new Facebook, or let's have flying cars and all this stuff, but rather something that works, something that makes money, something like SAP being like the business software that everybody uses. And it might not be flashy, but it might make money.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Moving on to WeFox, which is a Berlin-based insurtech, which also was able to get quite some money. Despite the market conditions, they closed a $400 million Series D round and are now also valued at much more than just $1 billion, precisely at $4.5 billion. A bit sadder news is that one former guest of ours had to file for insolvency. The crypto startup Nuri has had a streak of bad luck. First, they had to announce that they need to cut almost 20% of their headcount. Then millions of their clients' money was frozen with Celsius. And now a blog claimed it all hid during fundraising and might eventually followed by an insolvency filing. And now the insolvency administrator says there are parties interested in buying the company. So we will see how this will all develop in the very volatile crypto market.
Talking about developing.
Moving on to actual banks.
Yeah, talking about developing here, new brokers. That and the quick delivery startups, who is the, sorry, pardon my language, hot shit in the last few years, and now new brokers close to the edge. No good news from the SEC report on the poster child of all new brokers. The Robinhood almost imploded during GameStop meme stock chaos, writes TechCrunch. Unfortunately, there's no report for Germany mentioning, for example, Trade Republic, but we know they also stopped with the trades. One of the reasons, very simplified, all the trading goes through a few loopholes where you have to post collateral and then has to be cash, high valued stuff. And that was something they had to come up with in order to get the trades done. Bankman-Fried's FTX is seeking a path to buy Robinhood, writes Bloomberg. What does this mean for Bitpanda, Trade Republic, and Scalable Capital and N26? We do not know yet if they are looking for a strategic buyer or an IPO. Yeah, B2B neobanks had a pretty big deal week. We talked about Conto announcing plans to acquire Penta, as we have predicted 2 weeks before, admittedly relying on another podcast, but we found it another blog, but we found it very likely. We had extensive coverage of Penta in the past, linked in the article, as well as an interview with Conto's head of Germany. Also, Contist was selling itself at a very hefty discounted price. They are officially headquartered, the parent company, in Denmark, but they exclusively operated in Germany. Again, quick delivery, viability of quick delivery business models is still questioned, or is now questioned. After only 1 year, Gorillas has to close shop in Belgium. Gorillas wants to save itself with advertising from consumers and food giants around the world. The producer of the products, they deliver every day. Then there's more signs of the current economic environment for startups. Munich-based quick delivery startup Arrive delivers tech gadgets and lifestyle product. They just had to shut down 2 of their 5 locations in Germany. Gorillas also closed their rider platform Street Fleet and laid off 100 plus riders. They completely shut it down. Quick delivery service Frische Post from Hamburg changes its delivery model at home, was the first news. Deliver with electric cargo bikes and closes shop in Munich and Berlin. And later, Frische Post had to file for insolvency along with almost the exact same day with competitor Get Faster. It looks like Frische Post will be able to continue. There's no statement from Get Faster. The reason for Frische Post filing for insolvency was reported later. They were in the process of being acquired, but the deal fell through as the buyer pulled out. In Germany, you say, erst hatten sie klein Glück und dann kam Pech dazu. Translated a little bit. First, we had no luck and then there was bad luck. Delivery Hero and Glovo targeted in EU antitrust inspection, and then the EU antitrust authorities even searched Delivery Hero headquarters. So they're in a questionable market position, margins going down, profits going down, and then the market authorities also search your headquarters. That is not really a good place to be.
No, and I mean we spoke about it quite often on the podcast already. And I think, I mean, with all these things, it's this idea of like a problem for every solution. And it seems kind of just like retro engineered that this is something that people urgently need. Even with something like Arrive, who claims to like bring you your favorite scented candles within 30 minutes. I mean, it's nice, but how many scented candles do people want to have delivered on a regular basis? And how much are they willing to pay for a price premium for all this?
For me, maybe one a year.
Maybe you should treat yourself a bit more. To more scented candles and also to support the startup scene. But yeah, I mean, with all of these, and also there's a lot of like criticism going on. I spoke about how here in my New York neighborhood, those super fast delivery startups closed down one after the other. And they also had to face a lot of criticism for having what is called the dark stores. So the storefronts, which are part of the community, part of the city, all of a sudden became private places because you were not allowed to walk into the supermarkets. So there were also politicians, especially on the more progressive side, who said, no, we need those spaces to be like public spaces, and you can't just put up a warehouse in the middle of the city. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks still around this business model, and we will see how it goes.
Question marks. Good thing. Question marks. Job cuts kept coming even during summer. The current market conditions led to a halving of open positions at the German unicorn startups. And here are some examples, including a hiring freeze at established tech company SAP. We just talked about them. Office software company Lendis joins bigger names and cuts 15% of their team. Austrian crypto unicorn Bitpanda cuts more than 25% of its headcount. And what really struck me was a real estate platform Mac Makler was seen as a unicorn candidate in Berlin, but they first celebrated with their employees using the hashtag #OneTeam to post photos. And then after this, they announced to fire 12% of the workforce. Not really nice. Also, Amazon aggregator unicorn Seller X had laid off staff. As a wave of layoffs continues to sweep the industry. But it's not all bad news. As we said, 8 out of 10 startups in Germany are still looking to hire employees, according to a recent survey of Bitkom. But I would bet it's the people who are very hard to combine, like product managers, experienced coders and stuff like that. I just recently talked to a person who is in charge of headhunting for several companies, and they thought there was a big opportunity to get Ukrainian coders to Germany because the company broke down. They had something like 2,000 coders. Guess how much he got? 2. They were all swept out. It's incredible, this market, if you really have the skills. You can't buy fintech success even if you are an insurance juggernaut. Hey Money is insurance giant Allianz take on a multi-banking app. By the way, I think they almost all disappeared. They even hired 2 experienced entrepreneurs, but now they pulled the plug on the project. And the last top news, again, Wirecard. Wirecard apparently forged client details to secure 900 million investment from SoftBank, reported the Financial Times. Let's go a little bit to my most favorite stuff. Housekeeping and time to brag. So we can tell you how awesome we are. This year is already half over, so we dug into the analytics of our hosting service. In the first half of 2022, our podcasts were downloaded and heard in 109 countries across the world. That really blew my mind. We also reached the global top 20 entrepreneurship podcasts on Apple Podcasts, so Apple Entrepreneurship All, as well as the top 100 business podcasts, all on Apple for the first time that we know of. We only made aware of this since we use a new analytics service called Podder. And in August, we apparently did pretty good. We were trending around the world. Our podcast was in Apple's entrepreneurship podcast charts in Germany, Ukraine, and Croatia. FinTech Germany was in Apple's business and entrepreneurship podcasts in Mauritius. Yes, surprised the hell out of me as well. Deep Tech Germany was in Apple's entrepreneurship podcast charts in the UK and Belarus, plus global entrepreneurship and business podcasts, as we said before, plus Chartable's podcast charts global tech, global business, global news, USA, India, and France. Guys, we're very, very happy for your support. Thank you very much. And we published a lot of stuff, including the new bank deal week and also Samsung buys IP of German startup Celonis for $300 million. All employees are fired. That was one of the strongest performing blogs this summer. Chris, I talked enough. Can you take over the ecosystem? And keep in mind, you're still challenged for keeping your black belt in geography. So
It will be coming up. But first of all, let's take a bit of a step back and have a look at the ecosystem with some inspiring articles that we found. One is that we start out with 2 questions from legendary venture capitalist Hunter Walk, claiming that these 2 questions are what you need to understand the next few years of venture and startups. Number 1, is it a tech recession or a general recession? Number 2, will there be one category winner or multiple 5 billion plus winners? In our show notes, you can get more in depth of these encouraging questions. We also see some grim news for the German economy on the horizon. And here there are not yet the news of the potential natural gas shortfall in the fall fully included. German consumers are spending less money than they used to. Retail revenues took a dive by around 9% in June. It's the largest dive for 28 years. It does not look good for all retailers, but especially offline retailers are struggling a bit. I guess it's a bit of, part of what happened and what also had to do partly with the many subsidies or money being handed out during the pandemic, which I guess led in a couple of countries to the fact that there was much more money in the market, which then leads to the inflation and so on and so on. And inflation being a psychological phenomenon that's hitting nearly many countries. Well, it's it's a long story. Anyway, Swiss startups raised 2.6 billion Swiss francs, which is also roughly the same amount of money in euros and in venture capital in the first half of 22. The government is discussing a government-backed fund to support innovative Swiss tech startups. We have an article about this in the show notes. And venture capital investments in Austrian startups also show no sign of slowing. They raised 881 million euros in venture capital in the first half of 22, a 67% increase versus the first half of 21. But there have been more smaller investments made. The startups in the first half of 22 are not beating the single largest VC funding from the record year of 21, despite 300 million euros funding for Go Student. Bringing our focus back to Germany, a couple of news here. The venture capital investments in Germany dipped by 20% in money in the first half of 22 and 7% in numbers, but it was still the second best half year on record. And then something very specific to Germany, which turned out to be a very beloved idea of the German government, the €9 ticket. In order to explain that for foreign listeners, in Germany in June, July, and August, you could basically buy a flat rate for buses and local trains for €9 for the whole country.
I did it. It was awesome.
People loved it. Obviously, people love it. And it also makes sense in terms of the environment. And so but the whole thing also led to the fact that the not covered long distance buses grew a big headache. Buses departing the same day are half full at most. So this is one of the collateral damages there as well. Amazon had 56% of the German e-commerce market in 21, translating to more than 47 billion euros in revenues, and up from 6% from 5 years ago. So it's really crazy. The EU wants to set up its own satellite network for fast internet connections. Now Germany pushed the initiative to include startups as well. Germany moves to legalize cannabis, expected to create a domino effect. We've talked about it in an interview already. You can find the link in the show notes. And German white hat hackers at Chaos Computer Club hacked the video ident from 6 national and international providers. As a result, the German regulators stopped video identification for certain activities. Moving on to companies who were able to collect some money.
Yes, or companies who collected the data about collecting money. Most of the time, we're now relying here in this special part of the ecosystem funding numbers on CB Insights and competitors. Funding to cybersecurity startups dipped a little bit, they found. Global fintech funding sees lowest level since Q4 2020. The State of Venture Capital report, global funding declines by more than 20% for a straight quarter. Tiger leads aim-shifting lineup of most active investors, and venture capital sees a slowdown. But here comes the good news at the end. While $230 billion of dry power sit on the side, that means the VCs have to invest at one point $230 billion. Next section. Talk about hubs and deserving cities and entrepreneurs who will never get any English coverage. First up, of course, my home turf, Frankfurt. Also something I wrote as Rhein-Main VC, so to say my hobby project. Yes, I'm sitting here and filling out Excel sheets. I know I have a sad life. Startups in the greater Rhein-Main area have raised in the first half of 2022 more funding than in all of 2021. That's the good news. We've tracked 28 deals worth 407 million euros, which would be approximately half of what all of Austria raised. We also found 20 investments over 2020 and 2021. The state of Hessen made in their Corona aid program, valued at only 8.8 million euros in companies we classified as startups. And Frankfurt-based Node Energy raises 7 million euros in Series A funding. We go a little bit to the south to Darmstadt. Hornet Security, based in Hanover, Germany, acquires cybersecurity training expert IT Seal, based in Darmstadt. We talked to those guys in our interview. And the drone startup, yes, we also covered them. Wingcopter is looking for sites to set up a factory. Since this is expensive, they are also looking for new funding. Of course, you can learn more in the interview with the CEO we did some time back. Offenburg, not geography here, but I try to give you some perspective. A city with a bit over 60,000 people, pretty close to Strasbourg. The AI startup Conversion Maker raises 4 million euros in venture capital. The city of Koblenz, close to Cologne, and they have a population of about 100,000 people, not too far from Frankfurt as well. NBA legend LeBron James invests, amongst others, in $30 million private equity investment round in Koblenz-based Canyon Bicycles to fund their US expansion. And I hand it over to the black belt in geography, Christian.
Moving to the north, to Hamburg, where we see that startup Suena raised 1.2 million euros for their new AI tool, which will help trade of electricity. And Hamburg-based Postmates clone Ringu raised 5 million euros in funding in hopes of being a valuable competitor there. Kaiserslautern, also known as a K-Town because of still being a city, I think, with a lot of US soldiers in it and around it. Our 2021 interview guest Lubis EDA just raised their seed funding. They're working on a game-changing technology for developing semiconductors. You can learn more in the show notes.
The main reason, Chris, the main reason for lots of American soldiers is the airbase Ramstein and the military hospital in Landstuhl, which are very important installations in Europe for the US military. Go ahead.
Yeah. Munich, that is a city people know, has been faring well during Corona. Their insolvencies declined in 2021 by nearly 14% to only 334 companies, according to a recent report by Munich Startups. So I think in that case, it does not just include startups, but also like your little mom and pop shop, but still the economy in Munich being relatively healthy. Moving on to Switzerland, as we always say, we are focusing on all German language markets. And in Switzerland, we see that Metaphysics, with a K, is an immersive technology startup from Lausanne, Switzerland. Lausanne also, fun fact, the hosting city of the very first ever Eurovision Song Contest in 1956. Now Metaphysics raised $2 million in venture capital to bring their solution into the metaverse. Swiss fintech Yokoi is competing against other startups managing corporate spending like Moss, Pleo, and Spendesk, but argue it's not a winner-takes-all market, and the investors seem to agree so far. They are rumored to be valued at $500 million. Swiss startup Typewise receives $500,000 from Y Combinator to continue developing their AI-powered smartphone keyboard for consumers. So very much looking forward to that. And the biotech startup Tropic Biosciences raises $35 million led by Blue Horizon. And in Austria, keep in mind the news from the ecosystem and funding on the job cuts at Big Panda. And the Stolz auf Wien, Proud of Vienna Beteiligungs GmbH is a newly set up venture capital fund owned by the city of Vienna. They aim to invest 50 million euros in the city's startup scene, which sounds like a very profound stake. LSF 2030 is a new life science fund raised in Tyrol, Austria. They're looking at 50 to 80 million euros. And Robo Wunderkind was an edutech and early startup in Vienna. Their building of dreaming robo toys for children ended for now in an insolvency, though. Vienna-based mental health startup Stress Coach exits to Boston-based KGA Inc. And Stress Coach, make a guess of what it offers. My guess is those little balls that you need to squeeze in order to stay calm. which lets me move on to more general news, tech news, company news section. Even more investors and new funds are still raised. The German federal government and Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, KfW, unveiled the new venture tech growth financing, a debt fund for growth stage tech companies with 1 to 125 million euro tickets jointly with private investors. We have more about the strategy behind it also in the show notes. Einstein Industries Ventures, a new venture capital fund aiming to raise 300 million euros and invest them in European space startups. Exciting. Heilemann Brothers exited their daily deal to Google. Now they want to convert their family office into an impact venture capital fund, aiming at 500 million euros for the first fund. Former VC fund managers for June Fund and Atlantic Labs Food are raising 2 new funds for their new VC in Berlin, 1 seed and 1 growth, aiming for 220 million euros. We already mentioned Stolz auf Wien, the City of Vienna initiative. Xange is a VC with French roots, or probably then is Xange. And they're already having an office in Munich. Now they open an office in Berlin and raise 220 million euro fund to invest mostly in German startups. The headline VC closes over $950 million to invest in early stage startups. French VC Elia may have what you're looking for, a new deep tech fund for Europe startups, as Elia Alpha 2 closes at 77 million euros. Cathay Innovation launches what will surely be one of the largest multi-stage VC funds with 1 billion euros. Family-owned home appliances company Vorwerk, which it's a Dyson competitor. Vorwerk is it's a proud German industrial story. We will talk about one day. They raised with their Vorwerk Ventures their next fund totaling 150 million euros. And finally, very few selected fundraisings for companies. I will just speed through it. Berlin-based marketing automation startup Retail Rocket naps $24 million and buys New York-based SalePlay. Despite current market conditions, Munich-based deep tech startup Celonis raises 25 million euros in Series A funding. Berlin-based Catmos lends 29 million euros to streamline payments for migrant workers. The Berlin-based insurtech Element, the leading white label provider of digital insurance solutions, is receiving an additional investment of 16 million euros from existing and new investors. Conversational commerce as a service platform Charles raises a Series A funding of $20 million to become Europe's market leader. Satellite startup Live.io raises 19 million euros from investors, and EIB and EU research funding for their automatic recognition of dangers to pipelines, railroads, and power lines, which sounds like an important endeavor to be in. And Gunzilla Games raises $46 million to redefine the battle royale genre by letting players trade their in-game items off the grid. I'm pretty sure you're one of those people who has a couple of very pricey virtual swords. I once became a victim of PayPal theft, and all of a sudden on PayPal popped up that there was it was a pretty substantial amount. It was 900 euros or something for a virtual shield of apparently a character in one of those online role play things. But then I was able to stop it by calling the bank, and the bank lady, she was really in on the joke. She was like, "Sure, let me refund you for your virtual things. Let me put the money back. And what else do you need today?" And she thought it was very funny. So anyway. Fintech news.
Fintech news from me, yes. UK-German fintech SumUp raises 624 million at 8.5 billion valuation. With its payment and business tech now used by 4 million SMBs, the investment was led by Bain Capital Tech Opportunities with funds from BlackRock, PDOV Partners, Centerbridge, Crestline, FinCapital, and so on. It is yet unclear if it was a down round or not. German neobroker Scalable Capital surpasses 10 billion euros in their client assets under management. German fintech Raisin DS buys the payment services from service team from Bankhaus Lenz in Munich. Raisin already owns a licensed bank in Frankfurt. You can learn more about the founder in our interview. ID Now raising funds, shelving Germany's largest fintech exit for now. We also reported about this. You can learn more, of course, in the interview. Plus, ID Now Group invests in European platform and appoints Jean-Marc Guyot, so sorry for butchering the name, as vice president of engineering. Eventually, when the buy now, pay later hype is almost over, Deutsche Bank enters the market. And during the crypto boom, BitMEX wanted to buy Munich-based bank Bankhaus von der Heid. Now the bank is looking for a new buyer. And some Tesla news related to Germany. Too many cameras in a Tesla. Berlin police bans Tesla cars from their properties. Tesla's Gigafactory in Berlin stops delivering of Model Y for the time being. And during summer, the Gigafactory closed down for approximately 2 weeks. Chris, you want to do some general news yet?
ThyssenKrupp, one of the big giants in German industrial history, invests in Elching in Bavaria based Cap-On, adding digital pay-per-use and asset-as-a-service solutions for industrial customers to their offering. And I guess something that we've never spoken about on the podcast so far is a Kenya-based insurtech startup. It's called MTech, started by a German entrepreneur named Bente Krogmann, and they have Warren Buffett already amongst their clients. It's a fascinating story. Germany's 2022 Content Shift shortlists 5 companies. You can learn more about the shortlisted startups of the last years in our interviews with them. Zalando buries the shopping service Zalon and puts launch in the US market on hold. Germany cannabis investment platform Juicy Fields is feared to be a scam. The investors cannot access their accounts. The founders disappeared, and even the financial watchdog in Germany, BaFin, warned already in March not to invest. So, dried fields rather than juicy fields. Food tech, the vertical farming startup InFarm is a unicorn, but apparently only makes millions in revenues. Now the revenue in the first quarter of 22 shrank by 3.6%, but rose in the first half by 33%. It's still not a good sign for a unicorn in the current environment. That's it. And we call it a special episode for a reason, because it's a bit longer than we usually do. We will be back September 29th with our September wrap-up, which here in our Google Doc was initially called a warp-up. So I think we do a warp-up and a wrap-up at the same time. We still have some more inspiration in our Stay Ahead of the Curve section in the show notes, talking about strategic investors being overrated, software as a service M&As who multiplied, and the dreaded down rounds, shaving billions of startup valuations. But apart from that, I still hope that you can all enjoy the last days of summer, the first days of fall, enjoy what a new season brings, embrace all the feelings that it brings with you, and maybe go buy a scented candle or two.
And of course, send us ideas what a warp-up could be. We're open to your suggestions. Chris, it was a pleasure as always talking to you. Bye from Frankfurt.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye from New York.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.